In a world where life was cheap and death was a spectacle, there existed a profession so detestable, so reviled, that those who practiced it were shunned by society. This was the life of a medieval executioner, a man tasked with the gruesome duty of ending the lives of others, often in the most brutal and public of manners. Born into a world of blood and violence, the medieval executioner was a product of his time, a time when the rule of law was often reduced to nothing more than a mere suggestion. The medieval executioner was not just a simple killer, but a skilled craftsman, trained in the art of death. He was a master of the sword, the axe, and the rope, able to wield these instruments with precision and finesse. But despite his skill, the executioner was a man apart, a man who lived on the fringes of society, feared and reviled by those he encountered. His was a lonely existence, one marked by the constant presence of death, and the weight of his own moral ambiguity. The life of a medieval executioner began at a young age, often as an apprentice to a seasoned veteran of the trade. The apprentice would learn the intricacies of the craft, from the proper way to sharpen a blade, to the most effective methods of dispatching a victim. He would be taught how to handle the various instruments of death, from the sword and axe, to the more exotic devices such as the breaking wheel and the Iron Maiden. But more than just technical skill, the apprentice would also be schooled in the art of mental toughness, learning how to steel himself against the horrors of his profession. As the apprentice grew in skill and experience, he would eventually become a full-fledged executioner, tasked with carrying out the sentences of the courts. This would bring him into contact with a wide range of people, from the lowest thieves and murderers, to the highest nobles and aristocrats. The executioner would be forced to navigate a complex web of social hierarchies, all while maintaining a sense of detachment, a sense of separation from the world around him. But despite this detachment, the executioner could not help but be affected by the lives he touched, and the deaths he inflicted. One of the most famous medieval executioners was a man named Franz Schmidt, who lived and worked in 16th century Nuremberg. Schmidt was a prolific executioner, responsible for the deaths of over 350 people during his career. He was a master of his craft, able to dispatch his victims with a minimum of fuss and bother. But despite his skill, Schmidt was a complex figure, driven by a mix of motivations, including a desire to serve justice, and a need to provide for his family. His story is a fascinating glimpse into the life of a medieval executioner, a man who walked the thin line between life and death, and emerged with a unique perspective on the human condition. The work of the medieval executioner was not just limited to the act of killing itself, but also involved a range of other tasks and responsibilities. The executioner would be responsible for preparing the victim for death, often by shaving their head and binding their hands and feet. He would also be tasked with displaying the bodies of the dead, often in public, as a warning to others. This would involve the use of various devices, such as the gibbet and the stocks, designed to showcase the corpse and serve as a deterrent to potential wrongdoers. But the life of a medieval executioner was not without its risks. The executioner was often the target of violence and revenge, particularly from the families and friends of his victims. He would have to be constantly on guard, watching for potential threats, and taking steps to protect himself and his loved ones. This would involve the use of bodyguards and other forms of security, all designed to prevent the executioner from becoming a victim himself. Despite the risks, the medieval executioner played a vital role in the functioning of medieval society. He was a symbol of the power of the state, a reminder of the consequences of breaking the law. The executioner was also a necessary evil, a man who performed a task that others were unable or unwilling to do. But as the centuries passed, and attitudes towards crime and punishment began to change, the role of the medieval executioner began to evolve. The use of capital punishment became less frequent, and the methods of execution became more humane. The decline of the medieval executioner was also driven by changes in the social and cultural landscape of Europe. As the Renaissance and the Enlightenment took hold, people began to question the morality and the effectiveness of capital punishment. The idea of rehabilitation and reform began to gain traction, and the use of execution as a form of punishment began to fall out of favor. The medieval executioner, once a ubiquitous figure, began to disappear, replaced by more modern and more humane forms of punishment. But despite the decline of the medieval executioner, his legacy lives on. The modern system of justice, with its emphasis on rehabilitation and reform, owes a debt to the medieval executioner and the role he played in shaping our attitudes towards crime and punishment. The medieval executioner may have been a product of his time, but his impact can still be felt today. The story of the medieval executioner is a complex and multifaceted one, full of contradictions and paradoxes. It is a story of life and death, of violence and compassion. It is a reminder that even in the darkest and most brutal of times, there is always the potential for humanity and empathy. The medieval executioner may have been a man apart, but he was also a man, with all the flaws and weaknesses that come with being human. As we look back on the life and times of the medieval executioner, we are forced to confront our own attitudes towards crime and punishment. We are forced to consider the role of violence and retribution in our own society, and to think about the ways in which we can work towards a more just and compassionate world. The medieval executioner may be a figure of the past, but his legacy continues to shape our present and our future. The study of the medieval executioner is also a reminder of the importance of history and the need to understand the complexities and nuances of the past. By examining the life and times of the medieval executioner, we can gain a deeper understanding of the social and cultural context in which he lived and worked. We can see how the medieval executioner was shaped by the world around him, and how he, in turn, shaped that world. In conclusion, the life of a medieval executioner was a complex and multifaceted one, full of contradictions and paradoxes. It was a life marked by violence and death, but also by humanity and compassion. The medieval executioner may have been a product of his time, but his legacy continues to shape our present and our future. As we look back on his life and times, we are forced to confront our own attitudes towards crime and punishment, and to think about the ways in which we can work towards a more just and compassionate world. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Your support helps us to create more content and to explore the fascinating and often disturbing world of true crime and mystery. Join us next time as we delve into another fascinating topic and explore the complexities and nuances of the human experience. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.